Okay, I'm getting guess everyone can see my screen, Kwame.
I can see your screen. Guys, if you can see her screen, please put in the chat. Let's engage. Let's be sure that everybody's getting to see the screen.
Good. Awesome. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you for the opportunity, Kwame, to speak with you all. I guess it's afternoon for you. It's a very sunny Boston morning, which is sometimes rare, frankly. So it's a good day. And I guess a little bit about myself. My name's Divya Srungaram. I am a senior manager within Deloitte Consulting. Been at Deloitte many, many years. I've worked across New Zealand, India, and been in the US since 2010. I want to do full disclosure. I am not a designer by training, but I have led and implemented many, many, many design thinking projects. And I mentioned to Kwame that this is probably going to be the focus here is where 80% of my design thinking work is around analytics and reporting, but definitely a lot that, here, apart from like specific techniques and tools, can be applied across anything that you're trying to follow. If you're trying to create a new product or you're trying to create a new experience, these are still the fundamentals of it, but this is a little bit more nuanced around the analytics and reporting. And I'm going to try to pick a couple of examples. I'm a healthcare person, so some of them will be healthcare, and I'm going to kind of show you actual work products that we've done in the past. I've tried to pick something that was agnostic of healthcare, so we'll kind of walk through that. But maybe kind of like as we go through, I don't have too many slides, but maybe after every couple of slides, I'll just pause, get thoughts, get any questions, because I know when I'm absorbing something new, I'm not exactly like absorbing it right when the person says it. So we'll kind of like go through those slower. Does that work for everybody? Any questions, any thoughts from anybody at this point? And I'll keep trying my best to look at the chat. Okay. Okay, I'm moving too fast. I can definitely try to speak slower, for sure. I can definitely do that. Okay, so the first question here, right? Basic stuff. What is design thinking? So I'll just read this out and then I'll sort of focus on the main things, right? Design thinking is a structured process with a set of skills, tools, and methods to solve problems and identify new opportunities by combining empathy, creativity, and user experience. So let's break this down. So we say it's a structured process. You'd almost think that's contradictory, right? Design thinking is also supposed to be about creativity and the cool stuff. Like, why are we talking about structured? So if it kind of will say, Elsa, it depends on the type of end outcome. So if I'm trying to create a AI tool or like an AI model, and then be able to show my client the results of that AI model, what I create as an output as a interactive dashboard of the results will look different. And there's certain steps that you should definitely try to follow. You don't have to follow all of them, but they're definitely a set of 4 steps you want to follow. Versus I'm going to create a new experience when somebody goes into an airport and gets checked in and goes for a flight, right? So that's another set of experiences. So what we have to do for those 2 different outcomes are a certain set of steps. And so from a design thinking perspective, there's the world of pure design thinking of this is how you should always do it, versus practically, and that's kind of where I come, making sure people understand what they need to get out of the outcome and how do we get there in probably the most simplest and basic way. Does that make sense so far? I'm saying Kwame nod, so Kwame is my proxy for everyone. And then it's about, the key 3 things at the bottom: empathy. You have to put yourself in the other person or person's shoes to really understand their pain points. So this is kind of when I'll bring up the healthcare example. For example, often I'm trying to create clinical pathways for people to do better experience in healthcare. So an example could be, say somebody gets diagnosed with cancer for the very first time. Just imagine like what they go through. You're shocked, you're worried, you're like almost mourning, you're angry. Like if at the same time you have the doctor who's sort of the oncologist who's giving that news to the patient, you have the health insurance company and a care manager there trying to be on top and maybe contact the patient who's heard this news. They're all of these sort of players, and if you don't understand the emotions they're going through, you're probably going to be minimizing what you design. So empathy, obvious, but very, very important. Creativity, and this is kind of where a little bit of like, how do you bring in creativity apart from the obvious of, oh, it's a new idea, I never thought of it, but forcing people to think in a different way, going through certain process steps, having a multidisciplinary team. All those things are really, really important. And so that's kind of where we'll touch upon a little bit. And then obviously the user experience. And as much as we want to say is, oh, we interviewed these people, we've had sessions, this is the user experience we have. Frankly, people don't know if they like a user experience till they experience it. So as much as you can quickly get, prototypes, wireframes, anything that you can get in the hands of the actual end customer quickly so that they experience it again and tell you what they like and don't like, and then again experience and tell you what you like and don't like, that's sort of key for user experience. So that's kind of like when we say what is design thinking, this is what we mean. Let me just pause. Any reactions, any thoughts, any questions so far? I'm just trying to keep the chat open here. Does that make sense, guys, so far?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Let me just keep going. So Kwame, why don't you just pause me when you see maybe the chat flare up? It's maybe tricky for me to take a look at the chat with the presentation, if that's okay.
Sure, I'll do that.
All right. Another really important tenet of design thinking, you'd think obviously, oh, we just have a bunch of designers and that's the main thing. No, it's actually the fact is having a multidisciplinary team. And again, this is where I will put the big caveat saying this is for an analytics typical team. So if I'm going to create net new analytics, and let's take the oncology example, when are the best times to interact with the patient? What are the best steps that I could do that I could change the patient's behavior and help them get care faster? What are the things that I could do to make sure they recover and the best case of like living a longer life, right? Imagine those are our questions. In order to be able to do that, you need to know people who understand that area. So this is what is called business domain. So maybe doctors, maybe nurses, right? Patients have gone through maybe cancer. So this is your business domain. Then you absolutely need your designers, right? People who are going to be pushing us to follow certain processes, pushing us to think about the design thinking frameworks, collecting the information from conversations, running interviews, sort of being that sponge to, really kind of take in what we need to be able to design and create. Then you need, combination of all these folks, like your data architects. So actually understand the available data that we have, so that we're able to say, okay, if I want to be able to create this amazing dashboard, but guess what? 80% of the data is not available. Let's be real with what we can create. Let's think about what is available. So this is sort of what your data architects will help you. Then you need to make sure, what am I going to be doing the final outcome in? So if it's a Tableau dashboard or a ClickView dashboard or Power BI dashboard, I need to have my developers who have this technology, who have these experiences. And again, working with the data architects as they get the needs of the business domains, as they see the designs of the designers, can say, yeah, okay, I can build it, or no, that's not really going to work. The time to load that is going to take too long, or whatever that might be. So this is really important. And then if it's, a relatively complex sort of solution, you might need data scientists. And then if you really are trying to actually change behavior, sort of your behavioral scientists nudge thinking. But again, these specific roles, so I'd say the business domain person, the designer always stays. But the other roles, depending on what you're creating, will change. But remember, like whatever it takes to create the end outcome, that's sort of the team you want from day one. You want them norming, you want them storming, you want them to tell each other. They say, no, that doesn't make sense. So it's like, oh, this is what I could develop. And then basically, that's what the technology developer might say. The business domain expert say, I don't need it. That's useless. Why would I want it? Just because it's easy for you to develop it doesn't mean we should, right? Versus the designer saying, well, this is the experience we want to advocate. So this multidisciplinary team, like every time we've just like had, oh, let's just have a designer on the project, never as successful as having this full team. Yes, it's messy. Yes, it might feel like, oh, why do we have all these people? And often what we've done for design thinking projects is people can be on 2 or more projects at a time, because at certain points you need like the designer super heavily involved. You need the business domain experts very, very much involved. Then you need like, the technology developers, data architects to come in and do a lot more, and then potentially with the data scientists. But this sort of ebbs and flows. It's not like a nice structured 6-week, 8-week effort. It can go ebbs and flows and say for the first 3 weeks, we'll try to do these things. But throughout the process, even if it's like 5 to 10 hours of folks' time, making sure this team is talking, understanding the end solution, super, super important. So let me pause and see any other thoughts or things that folks might be. Okay, I think that so far makes sense. All right, So practically, what does this look like? And this is basically a process. Yes, for some projects, they've been a year. Some projects have been 6 weeks. But for the most part, the fundamentals have stayed the same. And literally, I've shared this with many, many clients and said, okay, this is the process we're going to follow. So this is what I'd call is the rapid development process. And I'll give you another view of like, if you want to do a proper end-to-end project, how the steps can change a little. But the first thing is research. So let's keep with our cancer oncology example, right? So the first big business challenge is that so maybe my client is a health plan. So this is a health insurance company that is going to pay for all of the medical expenses that this person might have. And they want to do a better job supporting people who have, difficult health conditions. So that's sort of what the idea is. So that's kind of the business challenge. But the issue is, who are all the personas involved? So the personas, it's not just in a company, somebody's VP of, I'm just making this up, like VP of operations. Somebody is like a product manager. Somebody is like an analyst. No, that's not a persona. A persona is a patient, right? So what is the experience the patient is going through? Another persona could be that oncologist who's having the conversation with the patient and will be treating the patient. What is the experience they go? What is the support they require? Then you have the actual health insurance. We have the family members, right? Members of the family, like, oh gosh, my parent or my sister or my brother, they have this terrible thing. Now we have to kind of work with them through this. And then finally, you say that's the client, the health insurance company. And even within the health insurance company, you have maybe people who are responsible for paying the claims and processing the claims. You might have people who are care managers and who'll be sort of assigned to be a nurse that is assigned to work with this specific person. So that's what we kind of mean by personas. They're actually specific kind of lenses for people's characteristics. And we'll do talking about personas in the next slide as well. But that's roughly, hopefully that gives you an example. And often when we're doing a fast, rapid prototype, I would often say pick a lead persona. Like if you have 10 personas, there's no way, and the idea of the persona is that everything you develop is in service to that persona. So if I'm going to build a dashboard and my first few screens of the dashboard are literally what this persona would need, how often they'd like to look at this information. So for here, it could be that case manager, the care manager, who's going to be working with the patient and all the information this person needs in order to effectively support them. So they might need, birth date. They might need the condition that this person has. They might need, have they had other comorbidities? That means other conditions outside of cancer that might be impacting their treatment. It could be all of the health insurance information. How much coverage could they actually get? So that's sort of about picking that lead persona. So this is all that comes into research. And, frankly, you maybe have like a week or so for this in a very quick project. But if you can do before even starting your project, as much as you can do the research is super helpful. Then next is about visioning. So this is again in the whole realm of a quick prototype. Quickly actually saying for your persona, pick the journey map. So pick the typical experiences that they have and where the pain points are. And then say, these are the pain points we're really trying to solve. And how do we solve for those pain points? And so this is where a lot of the actual design thinking methodologies and techniques come in. And it really is an art and science. If you have an amazingly experienced, empathetic designer who really knows how to pull information out from people, interview people to see what is the pain point of the experience they have today, what is that ideal experience they should be having in the future, that's sort of what we're trying to get through in the visioning phase. And then these two is probably where 50 to 70% of your time will end up being spent, which is the prototype. So you quickly sketch, and again, this is more analytics reporting, but you sketch out potentially wireframes that people would like to see. You sketch out what they're able to experience, what reporting would they get, what analytics would they get, what decisions would they need to drive. And then basically the very important part of iterate, going back 2-3 times again and again to the end user to see if this is useful for them or not is really important. And honestly, these things never get done. Every time you create a version, there's always a version 2.0, 3.0. But if you were to follow this process, this really honestly stops a lot of the rework you do. And the typical story, the business team wants this, the technology team understands one thing, they create something, and the business team says, oh my gosh, this is totally not what I want. By making sure business and the technology teams or the implementers are really working closely, that you have that multidisciplinary team through it, the probability of success is significantly higher. Let me just pause here. Any thoughts, any questions? Yeah, great question. And I think I'll actually show you an example where it is literally incorporating the software development and agile processes as well. And it actually lends itself really well. The only thing I would say for agile development, practically speaking, what we found is that often you do want to finish up a decent amount of design thinking and frankly, some of the initial prototypes before you go and develop it, because with agile, as you probably know, you need user stories, you need user points, and at that point it's literally like every 2 weeks you're going to have sprints and you want to have actual outputs. So thinking through that, like practically what we found, having a lot of the actual wireframe development and design thinking done beforehand, rather than pushing that part of the agile, is probably best practice, although you can keep tweaking and have designers throughout the project as well. Okay, so I think that's what I heard. Anything else, Kwame, from your end?
No, I think it's fine.
I don't see anything.
Okay, so somebody's asking a question. Where do I go from here if I want to be an expert in design thinking? I think Kofi, we will come to that. I think now she's taking us through the entire design thinking process and everything. So let's just let her finish with her slides and then we can go on from there. Okay.
Sounds good. So going a little bit into the visioning part, what does it look like practically? So visioning session, sometimes I've done like 4 hours of a day, or sometimes it's 3 days. You know, we just tell the client, please block your calendar. This is really important. We do some external research potentially before coming in. We might do some internal interviews first, but it really is a norming and storming with the leadership, with the people who are going to use these analytics reports and dashboards, and the people who need to make sure that the decisions they drive from these make sense. So there are many ways to do it. It doesn't have to be that, but I found whenever we've got that buy-in from the whole team and they come together, what we create at the end is a lot more effective. So as I mentioned, persona development, I think one of the key things for persona is like literally, who are you, right? Like, what do you do? What does your day-to-day look like? What are your priorities? So for example, a case manager, they might get maybe 10 to 20 new patients a week. And they have to make sure, I'm just making this up a little bit, but you know, they have to make sure they're interacting with them. They want to make sure that those people, you know, all the questions are being answered, but they might just say, I literally don't have enough hours in the day to like take 20 new a week and then have another, I'm again making this up, like 1,000 or 500 more people on my sort of list to go throughout the year. Like I just don't have the bandwidth, help me out, right? So those could be like their challenges. Their goals could be, what does success mean for you? Success as an individual, success in this job, what are your main priorities? So like making sure you understand all of these components is really important for persona development. Then another exercise that we often go through is, and I probably like oversimplified it here, but I just basically call it business questions and user flow. And this is, again, if we keep the mindset of building dashboards, or this kind of came through like app development, what are the screens that we'll go through? So like basically saying, what are the big questions I want to answer? And in order for me to answer those big questions, these are sub questions I need to answer. So that's basically big questions. I know it's a little small, is in big green and is in green. The sub questions are in blue. And then all of the data elements that you need in order to answer the sub questions, you can start kind of putting them in orange. And again, this is sort of where the art and science comes, like an effective person who knows design thinking well, who knows the issues a client's trying to solve well, is going to lead a very, very effective user flow exercise. And once you have this user flow exercise, that's when you start actually drafting up the mock-ups. And so the mock-ups could be literally on a whiteboard and some scribbles. This, for example, was done, there are many design thinking tools, but this was done in Balsamiq. And then from Balsamiq, you can do things like in PowerPoint, or what I'm going to be showing you as some examples would be things like InVision. There are many, many design thinking tools, Adobe Professional. It literally gives you the experience of being in that screen, and you can actually create like interactive experiences and those kind of things as well. So this is sort of the process from, you've done your research, you know what you're trying to solve. This is that visioning process, usually a pretty interactive process, getting everybody in the room, making sure we understand who the lead persona is or the persona should be, going through the user flow exercise of what are the questions I'm trying to answer, how will I get to those answers, what is some of the core data I would need, and then with that understanding, starting to sort of mock up. And at every point here, you're literally going to have a user look at this and say, okay, do you like this? Is this how you wanted this map to look? Is this how you want the analytics? Yes, got it. This is how the interaction. Okay, great. Then you make the next version, then you make the next version. So that's sort of the process there. Now, I think some of you had mentioned agile thinking, right? So this is a practical way that you would actually want to do it on a technology heavy project. So the first thing when we say research, again, like I said, it can be different depending on the project. So here, it was almost like first people had given ideas of what to solve. We wanted to validate whether it was even the right problem to solve. So like developing value proposition, problem statement, really understanding it, vetting it with the, because this was a project basically, this is a cleansed version, but they had 50 projects. You know, they wanted to do 50 projects. They wanted every project to start with design thinking. And the probability was a few projects when we started with design thinking may change. They may change, they might become smaller, all of those things. The first thing is about what's the value prop? Are we solving the right problem? Is there a need? Then it's about, again, identifying the user personas and identifying that key persona, building the journey map, then being able to do the user flow exercise, starting to do the mock-up screens. Then this is where, you know, from an agile perspective, it makes a lot of sense. So once you have the screens, then what you do is basically you break up the screen into different features and components and say, okay, this set of metrics here, I'm going to try to do in release 1. These sort of metrics I'll do in release 2. So you kind of then break it down to the user stories and backlogs. You want to make sure your architecture feasibility is there. And then basically you have your sprints and execute. So I think somebody brought that up before. This is a practical way of how you incorporate design thinking into like the more traditional technology projects. So let me look at the question. Where do I, okay. How is design thinking different from project management? I think project management is more about, these are these X number of projects that I have. This is deadlines for when they have to be finished. This is what I have to do. Oh, sorry, I think you took control of my screen, Kwame?
No.
Somebody asked for control of my screen. Let me.
¡Oh, mira lo que me regalaron, macho! ¿Qué onda, Gil? Ojo, el que sabe piola, guacho. A partir de ahora vamos a ver quién manda, la reconcha de tu madre. Colta, que no lo vas a ver por ahí, guacho.
Okay. Okay. We're good. It's fine. Go ahead.
Okay, I think I muted a few.
Yeah,
yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I just muted a few people. Let me go ahead and share screen again. I think somebody's sharing or something. What does it say? That? Let me, okay, 1 second. All right, I think I got it back. You guys can see my screen again?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I think the question was, how is design thinking different from project management? So project management is more about, you know, these are either I have one project or I have multiple projects. What's the timeline of the project? What are the outcomes by delivering, etc. But I think design thinking is about the actual solutioning for it, right? It's about the whole different thinking. So hopefully the process that I went through here should clarify why this is different from just project management. So I guess I would leave it there. You can definitely pick it up maybe towards the end as well. Let me see if there's anything else here. Okay, all right. So now let's do an actual real life example. And this is around, honestly, when I first did it, I thought it was a decently boring topic. But it's still very, very important and an issue that's facing all of us right now, which is, you know, supply chain and specifically sourcing procurement. And so Deloitte was creating our own sort of sourcing and procurement product. I mean, this is just a very initial version of it. But what we did was basically the same thing, right? We did the background of who are stakeholders. So we have, in terms of the clients, you have this chief procurement officer, you have category leaders. These are the problems and drivers they're trying to solve. Then these are the personas. So who are the different, you know, end users? So the category leader was end user. What are the activities they do? Like basically, you know, 1 hour a day, they're actually spending on the analytics. They need to do some negotiating. these are their goals and objectives, their challenges, lack of data. If they don't have the right data, they lose credibility. What are their priorities, etc. So this is like, actual outcome of that sort of exercise. And then similarly, we sort of took them through the journey map piece of like, what would that look like or what they would need to do. Like we put it across people, process, technology, and experience. And these were sort of the actual sort of user flow exercise. So like, these are the big questions, like, what is my spend, right? So what am I spending on? Where are my savings opportunities? What am I tracking? Where's my risk? And then these were the sort of sub questions under it. Then we started thinking about, okay, visually, do you think this would be a good way to visualize this information? And then sort of like captured all of that information. And then from there, what we did is, from here, I'll get into a PDF. But after we kind of did some of the, literally like what you see on these Post-it notes, like these graphs and scribbles, we sat down and designed what we thought some of the screens would look like. So these are called low fidelity wireframes. And so you can sort of say, okay, we had executive view, spend analytics, category spend, sourcing, tracking. These are some graphs that you'd see. This is how you interact with information, etc. And now I'm going to actually share the final high fidelity wireframes that we did. Give me a second here. So are you all able to see something that's a sourcing and procurement dashboard? So basically, from those initial squiggles that you saw, and then what we created as low fidelity, this is basically what we created as a high fidelity wireframe. So this is your landing page. This is basically what you say executive view, spend analytics. These are all the different dashboards. And then these are the actual screens for the dashboards. So as you remember, we had all these, like, these are different dashboards you can look at. So this says quickly, how much am I spending? $100 million. What is the addressable spend? This means like 18 million, I'm trying to actually like reduce. This is the spend that I can actually change a little bit. My target savings is 9 million. What I'm contracted to save is 2 million, but what I've realized to date is only 2 million out of my 9 million. So it sort of gives me this answers quickly. It says red, green, yellow, where my problems are. So my total spend is not under management. My total spend under active pursuits is not under management. This shows like what my spend is breakdown on, and like different screens, like, what am I spending on, being able to interact with, etc. So this is like literally following the process. What we were able to create is high fidelity wireframes. We actually were able to create dashboards and things like that. But this kind of gives you a flavor. Another flavor of other kind of wireframes after we followed a similar process. This was about like Deloitte trying to figure out where they go, and this is all makeup, guys, so it's all made up, but in terms of the wireframes, but where Deloitte will continue to like invest in other like Deloitte. So Deloitte US often invests in other firms. So like these are areas of like, this is market attractiveness, alignment, cross-border affinity, like what they could do. So these would be the different areas that they would actually invest in. So the bigger the circle, the likelihood that that would be a country practice to invest in. This is looking at the same information from more like a tabular format, and then being able to like interact with your data, etc. So these are just examples of like when you follow the process well. And then again, all of these were like reviewed with different teams. They gave us feedback, we refined it. And after this, we actually went ahead and built the dashboards. So that's kind of like basically that flavor of how do you use design thinking? And we focused on the flavor of analytics and reporting. And if you do it well, like what you get out of this dashboard, honestly, has lived many, many years. So I actually I led the development of this one. And I think this was maybe 6-7 years ago, frankly, and it still lives, and clients have still used it, and we've implemented it across the board. Definitely many tweaks, many customizations depending on the client, but the fundamentals are really solid. So I think that's kind of like when design thinking is done well, that's sort of what you get. So let me see if there are any chats or anything. And I think I might go back to the presentation, or we can chat. Give me a second. But I think, like, honestly, where, you can always make things pretty, and I think that a lot of great designers are able to do that. But I think this is the fundamental part. So when you finish, from here to get to this user flow exercise is a huge part. And then taking this user flow exercise, getting into the low fidelity wireframes, if you can say it, that's where the magic happens. It really does. I think making sure you interpret, understand, then get this in front of clients or whoever your end users are, getting their feedback, reiterating. You can frankly reiterate in low fidelity because these are pretty fast to make. And then you can focus on more look and feel and style with the high fidelity wireframes. So any questions, any thoughts? And I think that's kind of what I wanted to focus on, is simple fundamentals and actually showing you, if it's not just talk and this is not just theory. If you follow this and do this well and have your right team in place, I think what you can create can be very, very, effective, not just for solving the problem today, but long-term as well.
Great stuff. I think somebody put a question in the chat.
Yeah, let's go for it. And feel free, I guess if it's just as, I don't know, Kwame, how you want to do it, if people want to just ask their questions as well. I couldn't see anything else apart from like the project management question. Kwame, I don't know if you see something else.
So before he asked the project management question, he was asking, where do I go from here if I wanted to be an expert in design thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, there's a lot of materials online, right? So just look at design thinking, there are a lot of courses that are freely available. But all of that is theory. I think just go and actually apply it, find a project to work on. That's when you'll actually get the experience and see what worked, what didn't work. And try to get under your belt working with different people and solving different kinds of problems. That's sort of how you'll get it. But there's a lot of good theory and a lot of good information available online and free courses for sure.
Great. So guys, if you have any question, just put it in the chat now, or just raise your hand and I will call you out. Okay. Someone is asking, which tool did you use in developing your low fidelity?
Yeah, the tool that I've often used is called Balsamic. I think you can literally buy it online. I don't know, it's decently expensive, like Deloitte obviously purchase it for us, but it's possible, and there could be other versions of it. So definitely look at like, quick low fidelity wireframe tools. There could always be better beta versions of them as well. But yeah, having a good low fidelity tool, I think is actually really effective, because like having to like scribble all the time and every time you change it, then you have to redo a graph versus like having a lot of reusable assets. When you use tools like Balsamic can be very, very effective.
So are there like other tools that you would recommend besides Balsamic? Maybe you could just.
I honestly, like, that's been, it just worked for us and we always had it. And so like, this is where I would say I'm not a designer by training. My designers would often like just go for it and like explore. But like, I think literally go on Slack and all these other places and just like find blogs of like, what are the most effective ways and, closest. Most of them are pretty good these days. Yeah. And then in terms of the high fidelity, what you saw was in Adobe Professional, but like tools like InVision are really good as well. I think again, they could be potentially the pricey side. So like seeing if there are other cheaper versions, but like what these next generation design tools do is literally emulate the experience you would have if you were in the tool. So literally you can click and see how the icon opens up and do those things. So those are all of those components that you can do from a visualization perspective. And even if you don't have them, I think be able to just communicate them with effective low fidelity. And here's the thing, if you don't have low fidelity, when I used to just build them from scratch as well, PowerPoint is fine. You can do it in PowerPoint, frankly. And it's about communicating what you're going to build, making sure the users understand that as best as they can before you build the real
thing. So Kay, you're saying, I actually thought lo-fi has to do with just representing elements on the page with shapes, but I see graphs in there too.
Yeah, and I guess there may be different ways to do it. The way we do for low fidelity for analytics and reporting is literally, is this a graph I'm going to look at? Are these the metrics I'm going to look at? How will the user be able to interact with it? What is the granularity of data? What are the filters that are going to be applied? So those are the questions we're trying to quickly get answered in low fidelity before we like show somebody like a style guide that they don't like or whatever. And so that's how we do from analytics reporting perspective, low fidelity wireframes.
Okay, somebody put a question. Maybe you could just read it.
Sure. What actually is design thinking solving, or what concept? So I think that's kind of what I've covered in the presentation, I guess, but I can also So let me go see. Yeah, no, 100%. This is like, I think when people think design thinking, they just think you have to be artistic or just like a designer, but it is very much critical reasoning. It's about, are we first solving the right problem? How are we solving it? Are we solving it in the best way or the most practical way, and getting to a solution that's been very thoughtful in terms of empathy, in terms of the user experience, etc. So I 100% agree with you. It's in terms of some of my projects, I do a whole range of them. Definitely some of my more enjoyable ones are design thinking because of that. I guess from a design thinking, I can share screen again, right? It is basically about, let me just make sure I'm not. So I think, I don't know if you were here, Joshua, at the very beginning, right? We literally said, what is design thinking? So that's number one. Structured process, set of tools, skills. You're trying to identify new opportunities or solve problems by combining empathy, creativity. And I think, like I mentioned, if you're thinking more agile, then there's a slight nuance to how you want to apply design thinking, where it's first, if it's this is across, we're solving 50 different projects or problems. First, make sure every problem has a clear value proposition, problem statement. People know why it's an important problem to solve, that we need to solve it. Then you identify personas, you do your journey mapping, and then you kind of are basically following through user flow exercise, mock-ups, and then to your point, this is where I think Agile kicks in. So they take all these mock-ups and you create them into different user stories or your backlog, and then you focus on making sure the architecture makes sense, and then you have your sprints. So I think that's kind of how I'd say the whole kind of process works through, if that makes sense. And sorry about the question, my network. Oh, that's no worries, Joshua. I have had terrible internet many, many times, so don't even worry about it. I've been on a call where literally with a big client and 4 times a drop off, and I'm like, this is just horrible. So no worries at all. Please, there's no basic, like, ask any questions, guys. Feel free to, no worries at all.
So maybe let me ask this for, thing is, so design thinking usually it has to involve a team. You can't be one person trying to do everything at the same time, is it?
Ideally, yeah. I mean, it really depends on how much time you have. So if you have like a 5-6 week project and you're a pretty demanding client, you're not going to do a great job just being by yourself. Do you need 7 people, 8 people all the time? Maybe not. This is ideal scenario, but I have sometimes, like, I've been business domain expert, for example, had a designer and somebody who's developing it, and so the 3 of us kind of got pushed through that. Now, I will say, you all are probably the future. Like, I did not know how to like do Adobe PowerPoint, like Adobe Illustrator, or like all these other tools. So I was like, guys, I can give you the SME knowledge from a healthcare perspective. You do the design, you guys do the development, and we'll kind of work together. And this really, really works well because you do need the expertise. But sometimes, like, if I'm doing a project, like on some of my initial design thing projects, I actually sketched out all the wireframes. I like actually put them all, but then I had somebody who transferred them quickly into PowerPoint. And it was like a relatively small team, but we got to the wireframe stage by ourselves. But when you actually need to build, it truly is a different skill set. I think, there are few designers who know like good visualization tools, and I call them unicorns, where they can do the design, they understand the industry, and they can also build within a development tool. But there's a really, really very hard to find. And I think the expertise you require across these can be challenging to find in one person, not impossible. But yeah, I'd say for the most part, at least, 3 you'd need. And then if you were doing a full-on implementation, this is your team. You absolutely need this team.
Someone put a question in the chat.
Let me take a look. Where would you place flowcharts in the given design process? Do you mind, what is it? Maybe I don't understand the question. Is it a specific chart or is it process? I don't know if the person who asked the question wants to just
would you want to unmute and then ask the question in person? That would be great. Okay, are you there?
Yeah, I am. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, I was actually wondering, we all know flowchart has to do with a process so as to attain giving a process needed to finish a particular objective given. So the design process has a start and an end. So I actually thought it would be one, if not the first or the second, it would be the very, should I say, key tool needed before the probably the user flow and the low and the hi-fi sets in. I don't know if I'm clear enough.
And I may not have fully grasped the full question. Okay, so I heard that, from a design thinking, and maybe I'm not so familiar with flowcharts, maybe that's the problem on my end. This is definitely a process that goes through and it's very iterative. It keeps going. So I think that part I got. But maybe Kate, can you explain to me what do you mean by a flowchart?
Flowchart has a systematic approach so as to get a work done.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that, so if you're able to see this slide here, okay, this slide 7. In a way, if I'm still, like, it's all not me understanding right, but if I'm understanding right, like, there is definitely a flow to this. There's, first about validating whether we should even solve this problem. That's number one. If we think it's a problem to solve, making sure we focus on the right persona and think about the journey that persona goes through. And then from there, once we have that, we think about what do we need to develop? Is it an experience? Is it a dashboard? Is it a technology implementation? Whatever it could be, or an app. And then you build basically the user flow for that. And then you create the end outcome as close as possible as you can. After that, you basically, breaking that down. If you're following Agile or whatever, then the implementation methodology. If it's Agile, then you bring in user stories, you're thinking about architecture feasibility, and you're running in sprints. And again, I don't think this is like one and done. As you get more, like, even as you develop features, when you do like maybe a demo for a client, the client might go, I don't like that. And so with that, you go, okay, let me go back, and then you work with the designers to update it and go through it. So I think that's sort of how you go through it. And I don't know if it's design's ever one and done. You can constantly improve it and refine it as well. Hopefully, maybe that was getting to your question.
Yeah, I get it now. Thank you.
Okay, no worries at all. In enterprise resource planning. So again, for ERP, so if you think SAP and Oracle and those kind of solutions, I think Tableau's already been bought over already, so it's not even an independent solution anymore. But the designing of what, like, frankly, the screens you look at, right? So maybe if it's like the HR module for this ERP solution, and am I actually having the screens and the workflows make sense for people in HR that need it? Or for example, at Deloitte, we have a tool that we have to keep on putting like a time and expenses in it. Like, is that experience that I as a user going through, is it good or not? So like how you design the actual screens that users use, I think that's kind of, for example, a area that you could apply from an ERP perspective. Does that help? Okay, perfect.
Great stuff. Guys, any more questions? Let's.
The class.
Theophilus, you want to ask a question? Okay. You muted yourself. Okay.
I would also like to know if there is a problem or a disadvantage using.
Theophilus, your volume is very low. I can almost not hear you. So
okay, I would like to know if there is a disadvantage or a problem using the same tool in making both the hi-fi and the lo-fi.
Disadvantage. I think speed could be one. So for example, tools that do low fidelity wireframes, they actually like have your quick bar chart, like you just go pick it up as an object, all of those things done. When you do hi-fi, if you've done it a bunch of times, then you can create some reusable like assets in Adobe. But the first time you create it, you literally create it from scratch. And so like creating that like high sort of pixelated visual definitely takes longer. And so you want to make sure like you're not having to like start from scratch every time you show a client. So that having the tools that are very much catered for your needs helps. Others, like honestly, like I said, you could just use PowerPoint, just do very basic PowerPoint. It just takes you a little longer. But it's when it really kicks in is like when you have multiple design thinking projects, multiple screens, many clients, then not having the right tools to do it, it really does impact quality and efficiency at that point.
Okay, thank you.
No worries.
Anybody else has a question? I think basically what Divya has been able to do for us today is to get us to understand how important it is for us to apply design thinking in our work processes. Divya, I think some of the questions that they're asking in the States, I know sometimes certain clients, when they come to you to ask you to work on projects for them, that you have like a long time frame to do stuff and get things done properly before you go. But the funny thing on this side is sometimes when a client is coming to you, they are coming to you already late. So they are expecting you to work magic within a short period of time to develop the thing and get users to also like it, to be able to make the impact that you're looking for. So, I mean, when you have a very short time span on your hand to work on a project, how do you, not to say bring a shortcut into the design thinking process, but how do you fast track the entire process to be able to not cut back on quality, and still be able to deliver good work for your client?
Yeah, and just to be clear, right? So a lot of my projects, I've done them in 4 to 6 weeks, like legit, like, and clients late and they're not sure what they're doing. They're starting to build and they have no idea what the screen should look like. So this is actually like a very much like this process from research, visioning, prototype, I've done in like, if you have the right team and the client's on board, 4 weeks. You can totally do this in 4 weeks. Now the build of the dashboards, I've had some projects where I've done that in like the whole thing from research to actual dashboard build from 5 to 7 weeks, but the teams like killed themselves. And I just don't, that's very initial in my career. And I was like, okay, we'll do it in 7 weeks. And I was like, oh my God, why did we say that? But if to get to the wireframes, honestly, you could do that in 2 to 3 weeks as well. Like legit. Often it's like the logistics and like making sure that our team is available and all those kind of pieces. But this is basically, I used to actually before call it like the rapid development process. So this easily, you should be able to take this to like thinking about research, visioning quickly, then build a prototype quickly, iterate easily anywhere from like 2 to 4 to 6 weeks. But then if you're thinking about actual workable, visualization, if it's analytics again, then protect yourself with that. But I think from a design thinking process, it can definitely be done in a few weeks. Doesn't have to be longer, frankly.
Great. Awesome. Joshua's asking another question.
Principles governing design thinking. I think literally the same ones, right? I think it's about the first thing, remember empathy. You need to focus on understanding the end user. Focus on the user experiences that they will go through. Make sure that you understand the problem you're trying to solve. Is it the right way to solve it? Should we be solving it? Those are things. And then actually like following their process to get to the end outcome rather than rushing it. People like, oh, just give me the dashboard. I don't need the designers and stuff. Just give me the dashboard. That's when you're not kind of following the guidelines at that point. And again, I will just, preface all of this by saying, this is how to do maybe like more analytics reporting again. And often when clients are like, we know our stuff, this is what we need. There's a whole like, if you look up online, there's called a double diamond approach for design thinking, where it's more, you're thinking about the problem and it could be any problem in the world. And these are the steps that you want to go through. I personally find that I've not applied it many times. So I wanted to show something to you guys that was more practical that I've personally used over and over. But there's also like the double diamond approach and other ways for you to think about those kind of broader design thinking. So it's like external research and independent research and like actually getting people to experience certain things. There are many ways to advocate the needs of a user rather than just asking them as well. But again, depends on budget and timing and what you're trying to create at the end of the day.
Awesome. Awesome. This has been a great session. Guys, any more questions? Otherwise, so I have put a form, a survey in the chat. I would love it if all of you would fill it for me. It's just feedback from this session so that we get to know whether this has been helpful and we can be able to use your feedback to be able to tweak and do better in subsequent workshops that we do. So if there are no more questions, kindly please just click on the form and just fill it for me right now. And then we will be rounding up pretty soon. So anybody has another question, or we will just be rounding up? Because Divya has to, Divya's time is very limited. She's pretty loaded right now, so we should be rounding up so she could leave. So if anybody else has a question, let's just take that. Okay. Well, since no other questions are coming, I would want to say thank you very much, Divya. I appreciate your time, and it's been great having you here today. And guys, thank you so much. I mean, I've seen most of you have been a part of the workshop since we started, a couple of you. So for 3 weeks now, we've been engaging. This has been amazing. And I want to say thank you guys very, very much for taking time out of your schedules to come here and learn. I mean, what we do as Techstripped Africa is to give you the resources, the knowledge that you need to be able to succeed in your various spaces, especially when you are a tech person. I tell people this all the time, that my passion is to help tech people become the best versions of themselves. It's not just a matter of learning the skill. It is being able to put the skill to the right use. For instance, if you have a gun and the gun's use is to protect you, and you just go about killing people with a gun, you have a tool, but you are using it wrongly. Same thing, a pen. A pen can be a writing tool, or it could be a harming tool. You can use it to hurt somebody. But I want us to be able to know the right ways to apply the tools that are giving us as tech people, which is why we've got someone like Divya come and have conversation with us on design thinking. So thank you so much, guys, for making time to come through today. I will be sharing a couple of resources with you. I mean, I have everybody's email address. So once we have new resources available, I will share with everybody else. But thank you so much for your time. Have a great day and enjoy yourself. I'll see you again. We're planning another workshop somewhere on cybersecurity. So just get ready, prepare yourself for it. We will get into that pretty soon. But thank you so much, everybody, for your time. I appreciate you. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Bye all.